Namaskar. Well, friends, I heartily welcome you to Bhim Bhashya, my audio visual podcast series on Dr. Saheb Ambedkar. This audio visual podcast series has 54 short speeches of about 20 minutes in length on Dr. Saheb Ambedkar, unraveling as many as 25 different dimensions of his multifaceted genius. Friends, this podcast series is focused on Dr. Saheb Ambedkar, his thoughts, his actions, his philosophy, and above all, the grand vision that he has seen for our country as a whole. This is what this podcast series is all about. So let's proceed. Well, friends, in this episode 31, I'm going to talk about yet another dimension of Dr. Ambedkar's multifaceted personality, his contribution as a contemporary historian. In the part one of this role, I'm going to talk about Dr. Ambedkar's highly acclaimed as well as highly criticized book titled Ranade Gandhi and Jinnah. Here is how it goes. The Deccan Sabha of Pune invited Dr. Ambedkar to deliver an address on the 101st birthday of late Justice Mahadev Govind Ranade. It proposed to celebrate and which fell on January 18, 1940. Initially, Dr. Ambedkar was not very willing to accept the invitation, but later he did. In the end, he accepted their invitation and delivered the address in Pune on January 18, 1943. This address was published as a book during the same year. In this book titled Ranade Gandhi and Jinnah, Dr. Ambedkar discusses the tests of a great man put forth by Carlyle and other political thinkers. Dr. Ambedkar argues that sincerity and intellect are necessary to make a man a great man. But these qualifications are by themselves not sufficient. To be qualified to be a great man, in addition to these qualities, the man must be motivated by the dynamics of a social purpose and must act as a scavenger of this society. According to Dr. Ambedkar, Justice Randae had qualities of a great man. Was Randae a great man? He asked. Nobody can question that Randae had intellect of high caliber. He was not merely a lawyer and a judge of the High Court. He was a first-class economist, a first-class historian, and a first-class educationist, and a first-class divine. He was not a politician. Indeed, it would be difficult to find in the history of India any man who could come up to Ranade in the width of his learning, the breadth of his wisdom, and the length of his vision. Ranade is known more as a social reformer than as a historian, economist, and educationist. His whole life was nothing but a relentless campaign for social reform. It is on his role as a social reformer that this title to being a great man rests. Ranade had both the vision and the courage which the reformer needs, and in the circumstances in which he was born, his vision was no smaller virtue than his courage. Dr. Ambedkar goes on to say, he developed, that is Ranade developed a passion for social reform and there was nothing he did not to promote it. His methods included meetings, missions, lectures, sermons, articles, interviews, letters, and all carried with an unrelenting zeal. He established many societies. He founded many journals. He wanted something more permanent, something more systematic for promoting the cause of the social reform. So he founded the Social Conference, an all India organization which ran as an adjunct to the Indian National Congress. Year after year, the conference met to discuss the social ills and to find the ways of remedying them. And year after year, Ranade attended its annual sessions as though it was a pilgrimage and fostered the cause of social reform. In fostering the cause of social reform, Ranade showed a great courage. There is a difference which is often lost sight of in estimating the courage shown by the social reformer and the political patriot. When the social reformer challenges society, there is nobody to hail him a martyr. There is nobody even to befriend him. He is loathed and shunned. But when the political patriot challenges the government, he has the whole society to support him. He is praised, admired, and elevated as a savior. Who shows more courage? The social reformer who fights alone, or the political patriot who fights under the cover of the vast mass of supporters? It would be idle, Dr. Ambedkar adds, it would be idle to deny Ranade showed courage in taking up the cause of social reform. Indeed, he showed a very high degree of courage. So let it be remembered that he lived in times when social and religious customs, however gross and immoral, were regarded as sacrosanct, and when any doubt questioning their divine and moral basis was regarded not merely as a heterodoxy but as intolerable blasphemy and sacrilege, including Lokmanya Tilak. Most leaders argued in favor of the political reform. One may judge it by any test. It will be found that the stand that Rande took in this controversy and his plan were correct and fundamental too, if they were not the prerequisites of political reform. Ranade argued that there were no rights in the Hindu society which the moral sense of man could recognize. There were privileges and disabilities. Privileges for a few and disabilities for a vast majority. Ranade struggled to create rights. Ranade wanted to vitalize the conscience of the Hindu society, which had become moribund as well as morbid. Ranade aimed to create a real social democracy without which there could be no sure and stable politics. The conflict was between two opposing points of view, and it centered around the question which is more important for the survival of a nation: political reform or a strong moral fiber. Ranade took the view that moral stamina was more important than political reform. Ranade was not only wise, but he was also logical. He told his opponents against playing the part of political radicals and social Tories. That is, political radicals and social conservatives, social Tories. In clear and unmistakable terms, he warned them, and Dr. Ambedkar quoted Ranade, and I quote, "You cannot be liberal by halves. You cannot be liberal in politics and conservative in religion. Your heart and the head must go together. You cannot cultivate your intellect, enrich your mind, enlarge the sphere of your political rights and privileges, and at the same time keep your hearts closed and cramped." Unquote. Experience has shown that these words of Ranade have been true, even prophetic. Let those who deny this consider, where are we today in politics, and why are we where we are? Dr. Ambedkar says Ranade's aim was to cleanse the old order, if not to build a new one. He insisted on improving the moral tone of Hindu society. If he had been heard and followed, the system would have at least lost its rigors and its rigidity. If it could not have avoided communal settlement, it would have made it easy. For his attempts, limited as they were, would have opened the way to mutual trust. But the radicals had developed a passion for political power, which had so completely blinded them that they refused to see virtue in anything else. Ranade has had his revenge. Is not the grant of political safeguard a penalty for denying the necessary social reform? How much did Ranade achieve in the field in which he played so dominant a part? The problems facing then social reformers were five. First, early marriage. Second, remarriages of widows. Third, liberty for our countrymen to travel and to sojourn in foreign lands. Fourth, women's right to property. And fifth, education for women. Of this program, he achieved a great part. If he did not achieve all, there were odds against him which should never be forgotten. The decline of social reform was quite natural. The odium of social reform was too great. The appeal of political power was too alluring. The result was that social reform found fewer and fewer adherents. In the course of time, the platform of the Social Reform Conference was deserted, and men flocked to the Indian National Congress. The politicians triumphed over the social reformers. Dr. Ambedkar adds, I am sure that nobody will now allow that their triumph was a matter of pride. It is certainly a matter of sorrow. How does Ranade compare with others? Phule and Ranade were contemporaries, and both were foremost social reformers. Who are the present day politicians with whom Ranade is to be compared? Ranade was a great politician of his day. He must therefore be compared with the greatest of today. We have on the horizon of India two great men, so big that they could be identified without being named, Gandhi and Jinnah. They hold leading strings. One leads the Hindus and other leads the Muslims. They are the idols and heroes of the hour. I propose to compare them with Ranade. The first thing that strikes me is that it would be difficult to find two persons who would rival them for their colossal egotism, to whom personal ascendancy is everything and the cause of the country is a mere counter on the table. They have made Indian politics a matter of personal feud. They are very unhappy at and impatient of criticism, but are very happy to be fawned upon by the flunkies. Both have developed a wonderful stagecraft and arrange things in such a way that they are always in the limelight wherever they go. Each, of course, claims to be supreme. If supremacy was their only claim, it would be a small wonder. In addition to supremacy, each of them claims infallibility for himself. The spirit of domination exhibited by these two great men have transgressed all limits. By their domination, they have demoralized their followers and demoralized Indian politics. By their domination, they have made half of their followers fools and the other half hypocrites. In establishing their supremacy, they have taken the aid of big business and money magnates. For the first time in our country, money is taking the field as an organized power. Politics. Politics has become a kind of sewage system, intolerably unsavory and unsanitary. To become a politician is like going to work in the drain. How does Ranade strike as compared with these two? He had not a tinge of egotism in him. His intellectual attainments could have easily justified any amount of pride, nay, even insolence, but he was the most modest of the men. He refused to be satisfied with the praises of fools and was never afraid of moving in the company of equals and of the give and take it involves. He never claimed to be a mystic, relying on the inner voice. He was a rationalist who propagated to have his views tested in the light of reason and experience. Ranade was principally a social reformer. He was not a politician in the sense of one who trades in politics, but he has played an important role in the political advancement of India. Dr. Ambedkar goes on to say, and I quote him again, the opponents will say that if I condemn idolatry when it pertains to Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Jinnah, how do I join in idolizing Mr. Ranade? These are very pertinent questions. Hero worship is certainly not dead in India. India is still par excellence the land of idolatry. There is idolatry in religion, there is idolatry in politics. Heroes and hero worship is a hard, if unfortunate, fact of India's political life. Ranade never received the honors of apotheosis as these great men of India today are destined to receive. He performed no miracles. If he was not a genius, he did not display that perverse super subtlety of intellect and a temper of mind which is fundamentally dishonest and which has sown the seeds of distrust and which has made settlement so difficult of achievement. There is nothing exuberant and extravagant in Ranade. He refused to mislead people by playing upon and exploiting the patriotic sentiments of the people. It is not for hero worship for which this gathering is assembled here. This is an occasion to remind ourselves of the political philosophy of Ranade. And to my mind, it has become necessary to remind ourselves of it from time to time. For his is a philosophy which is safe and sound, sure if slow. Even if it does not glitter, it is nonetheless gold. The publication of the address took place under peculiar circumstances. Ordinarily, reviews follow publication. In this case, the situation was reversed. What is worse is that the reviews condemn the address in scathing terms, as stated by Dr. Ambedkar in the preface, and I quote him again, "I am condemned because I criticize Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Jinnah for the mess they have made of the Indian politics, and that in doing so, I am alleged to have shown towards them hatred and disrespect," unquote. To this criticism, Dr. Ambedkar responded in the preface to the book as follows, and I quote him again. "What I have to say is that I have been a critic and I must continue to be such. I hate injustice, tyranny, pompousness, and humbug, and my hatred embraces all those who are guilty of them. I want to tell my critics that I regard my feelings of hatred as a real force. They are only the reflex of the love I bear for the cause I believe in, and I am no way ashamed of. For these reasons, I tender no apologies for my criticism of Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Jinnah, the two men who have brought India's political progress to a standstill." Finally, Dr. Ambedkar says in his preface, as a sort of concluding remarks, and I quote him again, "However strong, however filthy be the abuses which the Congress press chooses to shower on me, I must do my duty. I am no worshipper of idols. I believe in breaking them. I insist that if I hate Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Jinnah, I dislike them. I do not hate them. It is because I love India more. I have hopes that my countrymen will someday learn that the country is greater than men, and that the worship of Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Jinnah and service to the nation are two very different things and may even be contradictory to each other." Well, friends, let me conclude this session here. But before I leave, let me remind you that if you like this podcast series, Bhim Bhashya, please like it, please share it, please subscribe to it. So long until we meet again real soon. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.